November 18, 1944. Wassenach, Germany. The air tastes of whetstone and cordite. A fine, persistent drizzle slicks the rubble-strewn streets of what was once a quiet village nestled in the northern fringe of the Hurtgen forest. For the men of the 28th Infantry Division, it is just another circle of hell. They call their own unit the Bloody Bucket, and here, the bucket is overflowing. Each step is a gamble, a negotiation with shattered masonry, twisted rebar, and the ever-present threat of a German 88mm shell screaming in from the ridgeline. The sound of war is a constant, grinding symphony, the distant, rhythmic thump of artillery, the dry cough of a mortar tube, and the sudden, violent chatter of a German MG-42, a sound the GIs call Hitler's buzzsaw. Corporal John Miller, a medic with Fox Company, keeps his head low as he moves. They call him Doc, a title he wears like a lead weight. His M1 helmet is scraped and dented, the red cross on it a faded, muddy target. Beside him, Private First Class Sam Chen, his replacement aide man, moves with the jerky uncertainty of a man who hasn't yet learned to trust the ground beneath his feet. Chen is barely 20, his face still holding the softness of a farm boy from California. He clutches his aid bag, its canvas stained with the lifeblood of men he'd known for less than a week. Every explosion makes him flinch, his eyes darting towards the sound. Miller doesn't flinch anymore. The war has hammered that out of him. He just registers the sound, calculates its distance, and keeps moving. "Stay off the skyline, Chen," he mutters, his voice a low rasp. "And watch for wires." Jerry loves his little surprises. They are following a squad from 2nd Platoon, their M1 rifles held at the ready as they clear the street, house by agonizing house. The buildings are skeletal, their interiors blown out, exposing the sad, intimate details of lives interrupted: a child's rocking horse lying on its side, wallpaper with faded flowers peeling from a soot-stained wall. You are here, in the cold, wet ruin. You can feel the grit of pulverized brick under your boots, the damp chill that seeps through your wool uniform no matter how many layers you wear. The world has been reduced to shades of gray and brown, a landscape of decay. A sudden burst of rifle fire erupts from a window down the street. The GIs dive for cover, returning fire with the loud, authoritative ping of their Garands ejecting empty clips. Miller and Chen press themselves against the cold, wet wall of a collapsed butcher shop, the smell of old blood and decay thick in their nostrils. "Stay put," Miller grunts, his eyes scanning the windows, looking for the muzzle flash. He doesn't reach for the .45 on his hip. A medic with a gun is a medic who can't do his job. His weapons are morphine syrettes, sulfa powder, and battle dressings. The firefight is brief, violent, and one-sided. A well-aimed grenade silences the German sniper. The silence that follows is heavy, punctuated only by the dripping of rain and the ragged breathing of the soldiers. The squad leader, Sergeant Piotrowski, waves them forward. "Move it. Doc, stay close. We got a report of civilians holed up in the cellar of the old post office. Command wants M cleared out before we call in RD on that ridge." They advance, hugging the walls, their boots crunching on glass and spent casings. The post office is a carcass of a building, its facade pocked with shell craters. As they approach, a low moan drifts from the shattered entrance. Piotrowski holds up a fist, and the squad freezes. A figure emerges from the darkness of the cellar stairs, then another, and another. They are ghosts in gray clothing, their faces smudged with dirt and streaked with tears. Old men, women, children, their eyes wide and vacant with the shock of being buried alive. They blink in the dim light, their hands held up in a universal gesture of surrender and fear. Among them, a woman stands near the back of the group. Her name is Elodie. She holds the hand of a small, trembling boy, no older than 6. Her face is a pale, stoic mask. Unlike the others who stumble and weep, she holds herself rigidly upright, her chin lifted. She is a pillar of stillness in a world of chaos. Her focus is absolute, a silent promise to the child whose small hand she clutches. Miller gives her a cursory glance, his professional gaze sweeping over her before moving on, already assessing the more obvious injuries in the crowd. She is just another refugee, another piece of the war's human debris. He doesn't see the fierce, desperate battle being waged within her, the sheer force of will it takes for her to simply remain on her feet. The civilians emerge into the rain-soaked daylight like creatures from another world. They are a tide of human misery, their faces etched with the trauma of enduring days of shelling in a damp, dark cellar. They are covered in a fine gray powder of concrete dust, which clings to their hair and clothes, giving them a spectral, ghost-like appearance. The GIs from Piotrowski's squad stand back, their rifles held loosely, their expressions a mixture of pity and suspicion. Every civilian is a potential risk, a tragic variable in a deadly equation. But these are not threats. These are the broken remnants of a town caught between two armies. Doc Miller and Sam Chen move into the crowd. Their orders are clear: prioritize American wounded. But there are no GIs here, only these shattered people. Miller's training takes over. He performs a quick, brutal triage with his eyes. The weeping old woman with a cut on her forehead can wait. The man with the mangled hand needs attention now. Chen follows his lead, his movements less certain. He pulls a canteen from his belt and offers it to a young girl whose face is a mask of silent tears. She stares at it, uncomprehending, until her mother gently guides her hand to take it. You watch Elodie from a distance. She remains near the collapsed archway of the post office, slightly apart from the main group. The little boy, Leo, leans against her leg, his face buried in the folds of her worn wool dress. She keeps one hand firmly on his shoulder, a silent anchor in his terror. Her other arm is pressed tightly against her side, her fingers curled into a fist. She scans the scene not with the vacant stare of the others, but with a sharp, hunted intensity. She watches the American soldiers, their strange uniforms, their unfamiliar weapons. She watches the medics moving through the crowd. Her posture is a lie. It is a carefully constructed performance of strength for the benefit of the child. Every muscle in her body screams in protest. A fire burns low and deep in her right hip, a searing, grinding pain that radiates down her leg with every breath. Miller is working on the man with the crushed hand, his movements economical and swift. Chen, get me 2 packets of sulfa and a large dressing. Now. Chen fumbles in his aid bag, his fingers clumsy with cold and nerves. He finds the supplies and hands them to Miller, his eyes lingering on the raw, pulp flesh of the man's injury. The man doesn't scream. He just lets out a long, low hiss of air through his teeth. In this war, you learn to conserve your energy, even your pain. Elodie forces herself to take a slow, deliberate breath. The air feels like sandpaper in her lungs. She needs to move, to get Leo away from the street, away from the soldiers and the bodies. But her legs feel like they are made of lead and glass. When the shell had hit the building, the world had become a storm of noise and falling stone. She had thrown herself over Leo, the impact a sledgehammer blow to her side. When the dust settled, she had pulled him from the rubble, checked him from head to toe, and then, ignoring the warm, wet sensation spreading across her own skin, she had guided him and the others to the relative safety of the cellar. She had not looked at her own injury. To look was to acknowledge it. To acknowledge it was to falter. And she could not falter. Now, she shifts her weight, a tiny, almost imperceptible movement, and a fresh wave of agony washes over her. It is so intense it makes her vision swim. Black spots dance at the edge of her sight. She bites down hard on the inside of her cheek, the sharp tang of her own blood a welcome distraction. She focuses on the feeling of Leo's small head against her thigh. He is all that matters. Survival is not for her. It is for him. She must be the wall that stands between him and this nightmare. Piotrowski's voice cuts through the low murmur of the crowd. Doc. We're moving up. Wrap it up here. Other units will handle the civvies. Miller finishes bandaging the man's hand, securing it with a final, tight knot. All right, Chen, let's pack it up. He stands, wiping his bloody hands on his trousers. He glances once more at the huddled group of civilians. His eyes pass over Elodie again. He sees a woman, pale and thin, holding a child. Nothing more. Her stillness, her rigid control, registers as shell shock, not injury. She has done too good a job of hiding her wound. He turns his back on her, ready to follow the squad, ready to move toward the next burst of gunfire, the next call of medic. He is oblivious to the fact that the most grievously wounded person on this street is the one who has not made a sound. The order to move hangs in the air, a promise of more violence to come. Sergeant Piotrowski's squad begins to reform, the GIs pulling themselves away from the sad spectacle of the civilians, their faces hardening again into masks of combat readiness. They check their ammunition, chamber rounds, and scan the blasted rooftops down the street. The war is reasserting itself. For a few minutes, there had been a lull, a moment of human accounting. Now, the machine is grinding back into motion. Just as Doc Miller turns to follow them, the world rips apart. The distinctive, terrifying shriek of incoming mortars, a sound the veterans call moaning minis, sends a jolt of pure adrenaline through everyone on the street. Incoming, someone screams, the word swallowed by the first deafening explosion. A geyser of black earth and metal erupts 50 yards away, showering the area with shrapnel and debris. The GIs, conditioned by instinct, are already on the ground, pressing their bodies into the mud and rubble. The civilians scatter in a panic, their cries of fear a thin counterpoint to the concussive roar of the shells. Miller and Chen hit the dirt, crawling behind the dubious cover of a burned-out Kubel wagon. More shells walk their way up the street, each explosion a physical blow that you feel in your teeth and bones. The air becomes a thick, choking soup of smoke, cordite, and pulverized brick. Chunks of masonry rain down around them. In the midst of this new chaos, Elodie does not run. She cannot. Her first and only instinct is to protect the boy. She drops to her knees, pulling Leo into her, curling her body around his small frame like a shield. She presses his face into her shoulder, her hands covering his ears, trying to block out the apocalyptic sound. The ground shudders beneath her. Each impact sends a jolt of white-hot agony through her side. The carefully constructed wall of her willpower begins to crumble, cracked and shaken by the concussions. The pain is no longer a fire she can contain, it is a flood, overwhelming her senses. She feels a wave of nausea and dizziness, the world tilting crazily around her. Her grip on Leo loosens for a fraction of a second. She fights it, gritting her teeth, forcing her muscles to obey. She cannot pass out. Not here. Not now. She whispers to him in French, her voice a strained, broken thing. It is all right, my love. It will be over soon. Stay with me. The barrage lasts for less than a minute, but it feels like an eternity. When it stops, a ringing, profound silence descends upon the street. It is the silence of a world holding its breath, waiting for the next blow. Slowly, hesitantly, people begin to move. A GI groans somewhere nearby. A woman is openly sobbing. Miller and Chen push themselves up, brushing dust and dirt from their uniforms. Everyone okay? Miller yells, his voice raw. Piotrowski's voice answers from behind a pile of rubble. We're good. Check the civilians. The new command sends the two medics back toward the huddled group. The mortar attack has forced everyone closer together, shoving them into the relative shelter of a bombed-out storefront. The space is tight, a claustrophobic jumble of frightened people and debris. Chen moves deeper into the knot of civilians, his canteen once again in hand, his face a mask of concern. He's trying to reach a young girl who is crying hysterically. As he edges past a weeping old man, he finds himself standing directly beside Elodie. She is still on her knees, her body shielding the boy. She is trying to get up. Her movements are slow, unnaturally stiff. She pushes with one hand against the rubble-strewn floor, her arm trembling with the effort. Her face is ashen, beaded with a cold sweat that has nothing to do with the rain. Her breathing is shallow and rapid. While everyone else is reacting to the horror around them, she seems locked in a private, internal battle of immense proportions. She sways, her balance failing her. She forces herself to remain upright, to not collapse in front of the child. It is in that moment of supreme effort, as she pushes herself to her feet in the ringing, dust-filled silence, that Sam Chen sees it. He isn't looking for it. His mind is on cuts and bruises, the visible wounds of the mortar attack. But his eyes are drawn to her stillness, to the unnatural rigidity of her posture. She takes a single, halting step toward the street. And as she moves, the worn, dark fabric of her dress shifts. Beneath it, just above her right hip, a patch of material is darker still. It's a wet, spreading stain, the color of rust and shadow, that has been hidden by the press of her arm against her body. It's a detail so small, so easily missed in the grand chaos, yet suddenly it is the only thing he can see. Private Sam Chen stares at the dark patch on the woman's dress. For a moment, his mind refuses to process what he is seeing. It could be water from a puddle. It could be mud. His brain offers a dozen logical, harmless explanations because the alternative is too difficult to comprehend. He has seen men torn apart by shells, riddled with machine gun fire, their wounds horrific and obvious. But this is different. This is a quiet, hidden devastation. He watches as she takes another unsteady step, her entire body tensed against a pain he cannot imagine. The stain seems to grow darker, more definite, as he watches. It is not water. "Doc," Chen says, his voice barely a whisper. He doesn't take his eyes off the woman. Corporal Miller is kneeling a few feet away, checking on an old man who was knocked down by the blast. He's annoyed, his focus absolute on the task at hand. "What is it, Chen?" "Got a bleeder?" he asks without looking up, his hands expertly probing the man's arm for a break. "No. I mean, yes. I think so," Chen stammers, his own voice sounding distant to him. "Doc, look." There is an urgency in his tone now that cuts through Miller's concentration. Miller grunts, finishes his assessment of the old man just bruised and looks up, following Chen's gaze. He sees the woman, Elodie. She has her back mostly to them, her body angled away as if to hide her secret. She is still holding the boy's hand, her knuckles bone white. He sees the rigid line of her spine, the sweat glistening on the back of her neck despite the cold air. His experienced eyes trace the lines of her body, looking for the source of Chen's alarm. And then he sees it too. The stain. In the dim, gray light of the ruined street, it is an unmistakable signature of violence. It is blood. A lot of blood. Soaked deep into the heavy wool of her dress. Everything stops. For Doc Miller, the world seems to telescope, the chaos of the street receding to a muffled hum. The groans of the other wounded, the distant crackle of rifle fire, Piotrowski yelling orders to his squad, it all fades away. His mind, trained to see and assess wounds in a fraction of a second, races. The location of the stain. The amount of saturation. The woman's pallor, her shallow breathing, her desperate, iron-willed posture. It all clicks into place with a sickening clarity. She is not just wounded. She is hemorrhaging. She has been standing, walking, and shielding a child while bleeding to death on her feet. You can see the shift in Miller's face. The hardened, weary mask of the combat medic dissolves, replaced by something else, a look of stunned disbelief, of profound, almost reverent respect for the sheer force of human will. He has seen dying men cry for their mothers. He has seen soldiers scream in agony from a piece of shrapnel no bigger than his thumb. He has never seen anything like this. This quiet, defiant refusal to fall. He pushes himself to his feet, his movements suddenly urgent but controlled. He ignores the old man he was treating, ignores the other civilians. He pushes past a dazed-looking woman who is staring blankly at a wall, his focus now entirely on Elodie. He is no longer just a medic for the 28th Infantry Division. He is a healer, and he is witnessing an act of endurance that transcends allegiance, uniform, or the entire brutal logic of war. He approaches her slowly, deliberately, as one might approach a frightened animal. He doesn't want to startle her. He can see the tremor in her hands now, the fine vibration of a body running on nothing but nerve and adrenaline. She senses his approach and turns her head slightly, her eyes, wide and dark in her pale face, fixing on him. There is fear in them, but also a profound, bone-deep exhaustion. She has held the line for as long as she could. Miller stops a foot away from her. He keeps his voice low, gentle, stripping it of any military command. He speaks to her not as a soldier to a civilian, but as one human being to another. The words are simple, direct, and carry the weight of a final, compassionate verdict on her silent battle. "Ma'am," he says, his voice softer than Chen has ever heard it. "Ma'am, you need to sit down." The words are not an order, but a release. Permission to finally let go. Her eyes lock with his, and in them, he sees the last of her defenses begin to crumble. The facade of strength, held up for so long and at such a terrible cost, is about to collapse. The moment hangs suspended in time. Doc Miller's quiet words sever the last thread of Elodie's superhuman control. For hours, her entire being has been focused on a single, desperate imperative: stay standing for Leo. Now, a stranger in a foreign uniform has given her permission to fail. Her eyes, which had been so sharp and focused, soften with a wave of relief so profound it is agonizing. The strength flows out of her limbs like sand through an hourglass. Her knees buckle. It is not a dramatic fall, but a slow, silent folding, as if the strings holding her upright have been cut one by one. She makes no sound, no cry of pain. It is a surrender. Miller is already moving, closing the distance in a single step. He and Chen catch her, their arms hooking under hers, bearing the sudden, surprising weight of her body. They are struck by how light she is, a fragile thing of bone and wool. They gently lower her to the ground, easing her down onto a patch of rubble that is relatively clear of sharp debris. As she is lowered, the small boy, Leo, lets out a panicked cry. His anchor is gone. He clings to her hand, his small face contorted with a fear that is older than he is. Another civilian woman, seeing the medics at work, steps forward and gently pries the boy's fingers from his mother's grasp, pulling him into a comforting embrace and murmuring to him in a low, soothing voice. His cries fade into whimpers as he watches the two soldiers descend upon his mother. "Get the aid bag, Chen." "Now," Miller commands, his voice once again crisp and professional. The brief moment of awe has passed, replaced by the urgent calculus of saving a life. He carefully, gently, lifts the hem of Elodie's dress. The sight beneath makes even his veteran stomach clench. The wool fabric is completely saturated with blood, stuck to her skin. Beneath it, a deep, jagged gash runs across her right hip and into her thigh. It is a vicious shrapnel wound, the edges torn and angry, packed with dirt and fabric. It's a miracle she hasn't bled out already. The cold, combined with the immense pressure she had been putting on it just by standing, had likely slowed the bleeding just enough. Chen is at his side, his hands now steady, his earlier hesitation burned away by the immediacy of the crisis. He hands Miller a pair of trauma shears. Miller cuts away the fabric of the dress, exposing the full extent of the injury. Pressure dressing. 2 of them, he orders. And a morphine siret. You are there in that small circle of intense focus. The world outside the war, the shattered village, the waiting infantry squad ceases to exist. All that matters is this woman on the ground and the hands working to keep her in the world. Miller applies the first thick battle dressing, pressing down hard on the wound to stanch the bleeding. Elodie gasps, a sharp intake of breath as a fresh spike of pain lances through her. Her eyes are closed, her face a translucent white. It's all right, ma'am. It's okay. We've got you, Chen says, his voice low. He doesn't know if she understands English, but the tone is universal. He prepares the morphine siret, tapping it to clear any air bubbles. Miller secures the first dressing and applies another on top of it, wrapping it tightly with gauze. His movements are a blur of efficiency learned on a dozen bloody battlefields from Normandy to here. He nods at Chen. Give it to her. Chen expertly finds a vein in her arm and administers the shot of morphine. Within moments, some of the tension begins to seep from Elodie's body. The harsh lines of pain around her mouth soften. A single tear traces a path through the grime on her cheek. It is a tear not of pain, but of release. For the first time since the shell hit, someone else is carrying the burden. She can finally let go. Miller works for another minute, securing the bandage, checking her pulse. It's thready, weak, but it's there. We need to get her to the battalion aid station. Now, he says, looking up. He catches Sergeant Piotrowski's eye. The squad leader has been watching, his face grim. He understands immediately. He gestures to 2 of his men. You 2. Get a litter. Move. The soldiers fashion a makeshift stretcher from a door blown off its hinges and 2 M1 rifles. They carefully lift Elodie onto it. As they raise her, her eyes flutter open one last time. They find Miller's. There is no sound, no word exchanged, but in that silent gaze, a universe of gratitude passes between them. It is a moment of profound, quiet humanity in the very heart of inhumanity. It is not a victory that will change the course of the war, but for the men on this street, it is a victory for the soul. They carry her away, a small, fragile procession moving through the ruins. Doc Miller and Sam Chen watch her go before gathering their gear, their hands and uniforms stained with her blood. The fight for WWII is not over. In a few minutes, they will move on, back into the grinding, senseless violence. But something has shifted. They have been reminded of what it is they are truly fighting for, embodied in the impossible courage of a woman who simply tried to stay standing.